Well, good morning. We continue the story of Rama, Ramayana. We start off with our usual prayers. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavaditam Astuma Vishavai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. May that one protect us both. May that one nourish us both. May we work together with great energy. May our study be illumined. May we not unnecessarily cavil with each other. Peace, peace, peace be unto all. Om Shri Rama Rama Ramati Rame Rame Manorame Sahasranama Tatulyam Ramanama Varanani. We delight in the beautiful name of Sri Ram again and again, for even once remembered, the name of Sri Rama bestows the fruit that is equal to the recitation of 1,000 names of Vishnu. Well, you'll recall from last week that we have the episode of Jatayu, and we can see that we have a great example of bhakti yoga. The whole secret of love is illustrated by the self-sacrifice that we have. You can imagine there that from the very beginning, or from the day of his contact with Rama at the Dandaka forest, the royal bird, Jatayu, had assumed a fatherly attitude towards Rama. And he gave up his whole life in the cause of the captive Sita. And well has it been said that the greatest love is somebody who donates or gives his whole life up for the benefit of the other. And the more universal the other becomes, the more intensive the love is. And so, naturally, there are emotions all around. The heroic sacrifice of Jatayu is there. And so we can see that the character of Jatayu has to be honored. All the devotees, the bhaktas, they all worship, even to this day, Jatayu as an ideal, as the best of the self-sacrificing ones, that is the bhaktas. And exercising our imagination, we should behold the whole episode of Jatayu's heroic fight from or through the eyes of Sita. How did Sita view it? Because she witnessed the whole thing. And she saw that the poor old bird's hard struggle against the Rakshasa king was completely self-sacrificing, she being completely helpless. And then, of course, if we see it through Sita's eyes, we would realize the love and gratitude and sorrow also that must have surged in her heart on witnessing this. And so we can be purified if we dwell on this by the grace of the Mother. What wonder there is in the rank that is assigned to Jatayu among the bhaktas. Then the second thing we have to understand in these recent episodes is that Sita is gone and we have no idea, but Jatayu for the first time gives the clue. Actually, the demons haven't consumed her. What has happened is she's still alive. There's been a capture. And that gives a glimmer of hope, even though they have no direction, except everyone is looking toward the south. If you recall from last week, all the animals are looking toward the south. Everyone is looking to the south. And so generally in the south they're going. But you realize, if you've been to the subcontinent of India, that the south is too general a direction to go to. It's not very specific. It could be a few kilometers. It could be 1,000 kilometers. And of course, it would be a long distance, since it was known that this fight with Jatayu took place in the air. And so a Vimana is there, a vehicle is there, a flying chariot is there, so it must be some distance. We also see in this whole episode how we can view from a philosophical point of view that Rama and Lakshmana are two sides of the same coin. They are two dimensions of the same mental calm and agitation, doubt and assurance. And Rama has doubts, but also has strengths. And Lakshmana has an impulsiveness, and Rama has a calming attitude, a rational attitude. But in this anguish, it is Lakshmana who is the stabilizer. And so this fortitude fluctuates in the two brothers now and then. And when Rama grows despondent, then Lakshmana infuses courage and perseverance in him. How like our own minds this is. We have these two dimensions. You know, cartoon characters puts a devil and an angel on each shoulder, and one whispers in the air some positive things, and the other whispers in the other ear some negative things. And then we weigh up the whole thing. No, we pull towards this way, pull to that way, toward that way. And the whole thing is framed in a dialogue. Now, we're forever involved in a dialogue with ourselves. We can actually really call it more a monologue. And so we can persuade or dissuade ourselves, but it begins with a conscious script which we can adopt and which we can follow. And we have to persuade ourselves from time to time in the midst of adversaries that there are some better things going on, that life is not as doomsday as we might think it is. And so we'll pick up a little bit. Naturally, the obsequies are being done for Jatayu. And we see that later when Rama fights and is victorious in Lanka. As we all know, the end of the story arrives at that point. Or not quite the end of the story, because there is another chapter going on, or another section going on. But Sita doesn't see this ultimate fight, because she's a prisoner in the Ashoka forest. And she has to be content with listening to reports of the battle and of the prowess of her lord. But Jatayu's devotion and heroism, this Sita has seen. She has seen it with her own eyes in the Dandaka forest. Unarmed as he was, he opposed the Rakshasa who had all his weapons and armor and humbled his prize at the cost of his own life. And this is why he is the best of the bhaktas. Regardless of what happens to you, out of pure love and devotion and loyalty, you then engage in what is often the battle against negative influences and negative propensities, in this case represented by Ravana. This battle with Ravana is more important than the battles in Lanka to some extent, because the pious will revere Jatayu along with Bharata and look upon him as something like a guide on the path of devotion. So Lakshmana is asked to gather some dry wood, some faggots for a fire, and he himself churns the fire and keeps it alive. And then, of course, we know from last week, the added bonus is this, that neither Lakshmana nor Rama nor Sita had the opportunity of performing the obsequies of their own father. And to do this to their eager father was a kind of compensation for this. Life has a way of arranging some compensatory factors. If we have patience enough, and if we're astute enough to look for the events of grace that unfold in our own lives. And so we recall that the princes chanted the holy invocations that are necessary as they pour the libations to the departed spirit. And it is important to do that, in any event for all our departed ancestors, because we are, in a sense, a product of the XY chromosomes and the genealogical intentions of all the generations behind us and in front of us. And so you see, they acknowledge that the king of the birds might enjoy all the bliss of the virtuous who perform great sacrifices. What is love? Love is sacrifice. We can define it in this way, or at least a mental preparation, a mental assertion that I can give everything up for the other. A complete self-sacrificing attitude. So naturally, they pray that may Jatayu enjoy the bliss of the Vanaprasthas who have performed great penance, the forest dwellers, and may that one also enjoy the bliss of those who have made great gifts of land. May you enjoy the bliss of those who fight heroically in the field of battle. May the bliss of all the good people be yours. After this, and all the prayers that we ever say will be with a generosity of spirit for the good of all. And so after the ceremony, performing the obsequies, Rama becomes steadier and stronger in mind, because this whole episode has diverted his mind away from the sorrow of the loss of Sita. And to millions, of course, of men and women and children in India, this story, the Ramayana, is just not a mere tale. In fact, as I mentioned many times before, it is a history. It has so much truth and meaning that the events in one's own life relate to it. This is the relevance of it. Just as plants grow under the influence of sunlight, so the people of India, where this tale originates, they grow in mental strength and culture by absorbing the glowing inspiration of the Ramayana, and may this inspiration be global. You see, when we are telling the story of Rama, we're telling it in a global context, not a regional context, because the lessons are relevant to all of us. And when we see any helpless person in danger or in difficulty, then it behoves us to think of this heroic sacrifice of Jatayu. And with a firm mind, we should try to help anyone who is less fortunate, regardless of the circumstance. We should put ourselves in the way. There are many documentaries of people in big cities, and somebody simulates a helpless condition, and a research is kind of conducted to see how many people will stop and help the person. And the larger the city, the less willing people are to stop and help, because we adopt a kind of impersonal attitude in big crowds, and we become more individually oriented. It means more selfish. And so Rama's losing health and lamenting in sorrow, that itself can be compared to the behavior maybe of another incarnation that he had, honored by another faith. I think it's said in the spiritual texts of the Christian texts that Jesus, nailed to the cross and about to give up his ghost, cried with a loud voice. And it's recorded, Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani, sabachthani. And this is relevant to the forthcoming events for the Christians around the pre-Christian period, that is the Good Friday and those events, followed by the glorious resurrection. But my God, it's a Hebrew expression, why have you forsaken me? And so when we look at this particular theological aspect, that is these avatars, these incarnations, we find a kind of a mystery that has, in terms of Christianity, caused some debate and clarification necessary for 350 years. Because the mystery of the incarnations is ever the same. They are weighed with the dust and tears of the body. They have taken this body and they suffer like anybody else and they grieve like anybody else. The Bhagavad Gita tells us and Krishna tells us the wise, they don't grieve for either the living or the dead. But as humans, we've yet to get this wisdom. And just simply saying this to people in the midst of bereavement is not helpful. Certainly thinking it is helpful, that we are neither born nor are we do we die. We don't slay and we're not slain. As a principle, it's useful. As a realization, it is useful, but it takes time. So in a sense, we have to acknowledge the human condition, and all the incarnations are telling this, that life is not smooth. There's also grief. And so in the face of the unexpected difficulties that overtake them, one after another, that really come into our own lives as well, Rama and Lakshmana, naturally they often lose heart. Their fortitude has yielded at some place and sometimes to great despair. We can see this clearly, and the poet Valmiki understands this and acknowledges it. But they managed to encourage each other and proceeded on their way. In other words, we can pick ourselves up and move ourselves on. So passing through this forest, the two principals were suddenly caught by a tremendously big Rakshasa, another obstacle for themselves. This was a Rakshasa of particularly ugly form. No head, no feet, imagine. Mouth was in his great belly, and he had two enormous arms which, without moving from his place, he would stretch out and clutch. He would clutch anything. Imagine the enormous thing clutching, say, wild animals like a tiger or a bear or any other living thing within reach, and then swallowing them. And he had only one eye, something like a cyclops, which was placed in his chest, but which was really terrible to behold. Now, we have a psychological exercise that we sometimes do. I give a kind of meditation, a kind of guided visualization. Imagine going into a dark forest, shadows are everywhere, and suddenly we come across a kind of monster like this. And we find that the monster is a psychological aberration in our own minds. And when we have that, we have to ask, who are you? What do you want from me? And create a dialogue, not be frightened by it. We have to learn the art of transforming demons into precious things, diamonds. Anyway, caught by this monster, the princes were for a while bewildered. They didn't know what to do. And then Rama told Lakshmana, let's not be confused. You will cut off one arm, I shall cut off the other. Let's deal with it in this way. And so they did it. And the name of the monster was Kabanda. And Kabanda really means some being that is barrel-shaped. A barrel-shaped one, looking like a barrel. And once his arms were severed, then of course he was helpless. And then he began to explain. See, on account of my evil deeds, now this is your psychological monster. On account of my evil deeds, he says, I was cursed by Indra to bear this form and this name. What is Indra, the Lord of all the senses? Your own mind. I believe you are Rama and Lakshmana, and Indra promised me freedom from the curse when you two should come and cut off my arms and commit this body of mine to the flames. In other words, when we deal with the monster correctly, and when we dispatch it kindly, then it goes away. And so this is a great analogy in this book. Anyway, the princes set fire to his body as desired by the unfortunate monster. And from there arose from the flames a lovely being which entered a heavenly chariot and ascended to the celestial world. This is an example of transforming, if I were to use a phrase, demons into diamonds. And it's become a real psychological technique of making a transformation of all the shadows and difficulties in our own psyche into something that is useful to us and something that enables our freedom. Anyway, before going, Kabanda says to Rama, "You will assuredly regain Sita." He gives an extra hope. "Go to the beautiful banks of the Pampa and see the help of Sugriva." And this is now where Sugriva and Anjaneya and so on are mentioned for the first time. Sugriva is living there in the Rishamukha hill, driven out of his kingdom by his brother Vali. He lives in constant fear and danger. Gain his friendship and you will succeed in your attempt. And so, having said this, Kabanda disappeared. Kabanda is a necessary component of this story. It's not just a random insertion. When we settle our mind and when we deal with our own inner demons and monsters and liberate ourselves, it gives us extra strength and direction. These brothers require direction. They want to know, where do I go? And not only that, what useful components has divine grace supplied to us? And this changes the whole dimension of the story. And so Rama and Lakshmana now set off in the direction of this Pampa, and it is a beautiful region. And they visit the ashram of the aged sannyasini Sabari. Sabari, the disciple of Rishi Matanga, and accept her hospitality. In those ancient days, sages were female and male. And Shibari was a woman of a forest tribe and a faithful serving sister in the ashram of the old saint Matanga. And when he departed this life, that is Matanga, she wanted to die as well, so devoted to him was she. But he said to her, "No, the time hasn't yet come. You should await the arrival of Rama, an incarnation of Vishnu." This is one of the rare moments where this is mentioned, that Rama is now an incarnation of Vishnu. It is emphasized here. And therefore has a specific task, cosmic balancing power coming down and readjusting dharma. And he's doing it for the bliss of his darshan was in store for her. And so the old and wrinkled woman lived her very saintly, holy life, looking faithfully after the ashram as of old and keeping it sweet, and all the time to receive the promised guest, just as we ourselves have to keep our own environment and our own body sweet to receive our promised guest, our own divine self. When the princes come, she produces the fruits she's gathered and she's kept for them, anticipating their arrival, because great and holy people have an insight into the timing of the arrivals. And she describes and shows to them the wonders of the Matanga ashram. And in those days, we can see that these are wonderful rest houses belonging to people who've taken refuge in the forest and dedicated their lives to prayer and meditation. And so, having toured the ashram, they then leave with their leave, with their permission. She kindles a fire and enters into or ascends into heaven, if you will. In other words, having seen with her own eyes this Rama and Lakshmana and giving them hospitality on their journey, she's now ready to leave. Having seen God with the physical and inner eyes, we're now ready to depart. Having fulfilled a kind of mission. We all have a kind of individual mission. And when it's complete, then we can go back to to our origin. You can tell this to children. See, life is a journey, and we are the traveler. We come from God and we go to God. Now, the meeting with this saintly woman in the waters of the river Pampa gives strength of mind to the princes. And they think over what should be done next. So Rama tells Lakshmana, I am beginning to think that we shall succeed. A first glimmer of hope is there. Let's search the forest for Sugriva, whose help we should obtain. So now there is a definite plan and therefore definite hope and seeking help. We can't do everything just by ourselves. There's a phrase, no man is an island. We have to take the resources around us. You want to build a house, not everybody can be the plumber or the architect. We have to acknowledge the role of everyone else. And supposing you want something in life, it starts off with an image, starts off with a kind of vision, a well-formed, imaginative structure that you have. And it has to be well-formed and well-defined. And then all the different components come in. Supposing you want to establish a beautiful garden, a cultural garden where people can enjoy flowers in season, then naturally, somehow from somewhere, somebody gives you a plot of land. Then from nowhere, some horticulturist comes along. Then from nowhere else, some people donate some seeds. And from somewhere else, they donate manpower, volunteers. And then somebody advertises that there's a garden like this for public use. And so it goes on. Now, the place, of course, the Pampa area was lovely. But the loveliness of the spot and the animals and the birds and the trees and the creepers and all the things that they saw really bypass Rama because his grief arises again. You can imagine all of these unknowns are still there. And every beautiful object wrung his heart and makes him think, how much would Sita have enjoyed this? See the love which is there. Seeing all this, oh, I wish I could show Sita. That's the natural response. Because Sita, of course, and Rama are eternally connected. And so every beautiful object wrings his heart. And he thinks, oh, if only Sita could see the beauty of this place. And so try as he might, he could control the human sorrow, which by his divine incarnation, he has undertaken to endure. And from a theological point of view, even just a practical point of view, you might ask, how is it that an incarnation suffers like this? Well, if it wasn't for that, how could compassion and empathy for the human condition arise at all, unless you go through it? And Lakshmana tries to revive his spirit. Don't forget, in this context, we can easily see that Rama and Lakshmana are two sides, really, of the mental frame. And Lakshmana tries to revive his spirit. He says, even if Sita is kept hidden in the womb of Aditi, what is Aditi? Aditi is the mother of all the deities, all the illuminating factors. It is the Supreme Mother. We see a very ancient, not just the mythology we find in the Vedas, this Aditi, and all the other offspring from Aditi are called Adityas. Now, Adityas is a certain aspect of that, and really it means the frame of time. All events happen in time. So when the Upanishads, the Brihadaranyaka Upanishads, have a particular section of a discussion, Yajnavalkya and Gargi are having a conversation. How many are the deities? how many are the illuminating factors? And of course, ultimately, we come to maybe 33 categories. What are these 33 categories? See, these 33 categories are also described as illuminating factors or devas or gods. Unfortunate translation. So, well, these are the 11 Rudras. These are the 12 Adityas, that is, children of Aditi. And there are the Vasus. Vasu means dwelling places. And so naturally, there are 8 Vasus because to indicate dwelling places or indicate space, 8 directions are given, 4 cardinal directions and 4 intermediate directions. Vasu means essentially space or an area where all beings can dwell. Now you have summarized a whole category of what keeps us here and makes our interpretation as it is. And then there are 12 Adityas. Aditya can represent time. Why 12, therefore? Because 12 months in the year from the human point of view. So it symbolizes a time framework, a temporal frame. Now we have space and time covered. And then ultimately Rudras. We live in an environment of space and time. This is how we operate. But we live also with 11 Rudras. Which are these 11? Well, there are 5 organs of information, which are called Jnanendriyas, and 5 organs of reactions, actions, Karmendriyas. And then there's the mind also. So we have 11 Rudras. And of course, from this, we can easily derive a kind of trinity. The thing that exists, that is existent, the thing that permeates everywhere, Vasus, and the thing which destroys our knowledge and can also destroy our ignorance, called Rudras, consolidated into an auspicious one, which we call Shiva. Anyway, so Aditi, in the womb of Aditi, the mother of the deities, we will discover her. And Ravana cannot escape. So even if Sita is kept hidden in the womb of the mother of all the deities that we cannot see, because that mother is nature in potential, then we will discover her. This is the encouragement he's given. And Ravana cannot escape. It's certain we shall kill him and redeem Sita. It's not proper that you should thus despair, says Lakshmana encouragingly. How can you let anxiety or weakness come over you? You imagine this internal dialogue going on with all of us when we become despondent. We have to raise ourselves up by changing our dialogue. If we lose a precious thing, we should work for its recovery with perseverance. See, sometimes our very affection becomes our enemy. Too much love or too much attachment, we could say, brings on grief, and grief weakens our effort. So, what need is there for me to tell you all of this? Lakshmana says, because he knows Rama understands and knows all this anyway. You know it all. So let's not lose hope. Let's forget the grief brought on by love and bend our mind and our body to exertion. Be brave, be hopeful. You shall succeed. You shall get rid of your sorrow, brother. This intense love that two people have for each other can be sorrowful because when one is absent, the other one pines. And so we find this human condition is there. Now the younger brother thus advises his older brother Rama, and the various commentators of the story, they look upon Lakshmana as Adisesha. Adisesha, the kind of serpent, is said to be ever protecting the spirit of Vishnu. And so Lakshmana, he always tries to give Rama fresh energy and enthusiasm. We can say Vishnu is there in this, we can put it in this pictorial language, and surrounded by this great, great energy, which is also there. The yogis pick this up in a very different way, and they call this potential energy, and also use this analogy of a coiled serpent. The great Arthur Avalon, the great Sir John Woodruff, who is an expert in the tantric system, puts it as the serpent power. Now the fugitive Vanara, Prince Sugriva, and his faithful adherents, with the watchful vigilance of fear, they saw Rama and Lakshmana roving about in the forest. They have lookouts everywhere. And they were troubled with doubts. Who is this coming to us? And we can imagine hill tribes in this context, more than likely, who haven't really encountered anybody before significantly. And they see people wandering around in their territory and begin to doubt. The first image that comes to my mind, of course, in modern times will be uncontacted tribes in the Amazon. And they come across people in these days, of course, who want to cut down forests for agricultural purposes. Anyway, so having been ejected from his kingdom by Vali, Sugriva chooses this mountainous spot because he believes that it was made by the curse of a rishi to be inaccessible to Vali, who is his enemy and his brother. Again, we find this duality. This duality, if we put in a psychological context. And now he feared that here too, Vali is disguising himself and is following him to kill him. Maybe these two wandering people are his own brother, scouting out to find him. And don't forget, Sugriva, the rightful king, has been displaced by his brother Vali. Or maybe another alternative is that some Kshatriya warriors, some military people, have taken the side of Vali and were also looking for him and there to kill him, like assassins. And the other Vanaras, these hill tribe people, these Vanaras, they run hither and thither in panic. And Hanuman comes, this mention is made for the first time. Now we all are aware of Hanuman. But Hanuman was Sugriva's chief minister. In other words, Hanuman represents an element of wisdom, the disciplined mind. And he reassures Sugriva, this is Hanuman, saying, no, it's not Vali, nor are they friends of Vali. It seems to me there's no ground for fear, actually. I should go and talk to them and find out the truth. First thing, go and make some diplomacy. And Sugriva was very pleased at this and says, well, I'll do it, but he also cautions him, be careful. Go and find out the truth and come back. Use all your diplomatic skills, all your communication skills. Now, this is true on so many levels. We often go into an impulsive mode when we don't take time to withdraw to some extent and evaluate the information or gather the information necessary to make good decisions. So they behave, these wandering people, as if they're searching for someone. They're clearly looking for someone. And could it be that it is me they seek? He's still doubting. Maybe it's me they were looking for. Maybe even if they're looking as diplomats. And so taking the form of a Brahmana, Hanuman approaches Rama and Lakshmana. And as he goes, he stands in front of them with a confident feeling possessing his heart. And straight he starts speaking out frankly. When we come across unusual circumstances or people, then we have to be confident. Now, Hanuman goes forward to learn the truth without discovering himself, but as he goes on speaking, he throws all caution away, and he tells the Rama and Lakshmana in great detail all about himself and the Vanara king. This is the best way to open a conversation. If you want information from somebody, then you first volunteer your own information. And do it in such a way that is truthful and therefore trusting. And looking at Rama and Lakshmana, he was beside himself as a devotee in the presence of the Lord. Immediately he recognizes this. When we see the divine face to face in different forms, it's because our own heart is prepared. And naturally, he praises them once he discovers this divinity. And he says that he was a Vanara and had come there in disguise. And this was because the king, his king, had requested this. O royal saints, he addresses them, your presence here in our area, in our region, fills my heart with joy. There's an aura around you as if you were deities, angels, gods, divine beings. And I take it you are here in the forest for doing austerities, spiritual practices. But why have you come to this inaccessible spot, so remote? Please tell me who you are, says Hanuman. This river and this forest are made lovelier by your presence, and your faces and forms are radiantly beautiful. You cannot hide your light under a bushel or a bed. Your light shines and everybody will see it. And the creatures in the forest, they are looking on you with reverence and awe. Your strength and courage are manifest clearly. Who are you? And from which country do you come from? It's clear you are entitled by birth, you are royal, and you have a royal bearing. You must be ruling some mighty kingdom. Yet you're dressed like ascetics. You have matted hair, you have garments made from tree bark. You carry also, though, bows and arrows. It's a kind of mixed message. It's a curiosity. And then he says, why are you silent? Here Sugriva, the Vanara king, driven out of his kingdom by his brother Vali, is in hiding. He's full of grief, and I am his minister. And my name is Hanuman, and I am the son of Vayu, the air, Vayu, that illuminating factor, that subtle element which infers pervading everywhere. As ordered by my king, I put on the appearance of a brahmachari, and I am now here before you. And so anyway, listening to these very courteous words, Rama says to Lakshmana, my brother, this speech of Hanuman has inspired me with confidence. Hanuman has inspired Rama with confidence. I trust him absolutely. Quick judgment. Did you notice the beauty of his language and how correct and rhythmic his enunciation is? He speaks like one who has mastered the Vedas and the science of grammar, an ideal messenger. And his king is extremely fortunate to have such a great messenger, a great advisory minister. And he whom we are searching for is himself in search of us, because we're looking for Sugriva and he's looking for us. And so he tells, well, we have come here to see Sugriva, and we see he has sent a messenger to us. Let us welcome him. Now, they begin to talk freely to one another, of course. And Rama and Lakshmana, on the one hand, with Hanuman, on the other, related their history and their mutual histories, their joys, their sorrows, their hopes, their fears, like old acquaintances. And as a result of this conversation, Lakshmana conceives a great affection for Hanuman. And he says, therefore, my brother, born to great wealth, he is saying to Hanuman, the eldest son of an emperor has left his kingdom and come to the forest. Here is his wife, who is dearer to him than life itself. She was abducted by Ravana, and he abducted her under fraudulent, trick conditions, not like a man. And so he's taken her far away from this hermitage where we were, and we are looking for Sugriva's help to rescue her and recover her for Aditya, who under a curse took on the form of a Rakshasa, told us. So that's how we come to know Sugriva. And if you secure the help of Sugriva, then the Vanara king, you will regain the princess stolen by the Rakshasa. And so we are here. We seek your friendship. We seek the friendship of your king. Now, of course, Hanuman has to answer. He says, well, Sugriva too has been persecuted by his own brother Vali. And he's been deprived of his kingdom, and he's been deprived of his wife. We are in similar circumstances. And it's now certain that he will regain both because you're here. My king will regain much by your friendship, and with his help, you will also succeed in your efforts. It's a win-win situation. Whenever we require help, we have to be prepared to help and be helped. We have to acquire a sense of mutual benefit going on. And so there's a kind of diplomacy also going on here. And diplomacy is one of the great gifts of humanity. And so it's now certain that this win-win situation is going to happen, or at least there's a hope that it will happen. So the three of them, they go off to Sugriva. And the way that they go was such that only the people who lived there, the Vanaras, could really cross it. And Hanuman resumed his natural shape and carries both the princes on his back. Don't forget, he's the son of Vayu. He can expand and grow as big as he likes. He can disguise himself and go to minute proportions, atomic proportions, if he likes. Anyway, the hearts of good men meet, and instantly they all come together. We find this is a natural law. And as the Quran says, the spontaneous mutual attraction of two hearts and not long acquaintance creates friendship. And this friendship is part of the divine dispensation. It was destined, of course, that Hanuman's sublime devotion should be at Rama's service for the fulfillment of the purpose of incarnation. Incarnations come for a specific purpose. And so there was initial recognition and acceptance at the very first sight. You know, when we meet people who are we naturally have an affinity toward, there's a natural flow of relationships. There's almost an instant recognition of this. And so his carrying the two princes on his shoulders was in a way an outward symbol of inward union. As friends and lovers embrace each other, Hanuman, the loving servant, rejoiced in carrying his Lord on his shoulders and gives us an example of an attitude of devotion where we can view ourselves as a servant in relation to a master. Servant not meaning slave, but somebody willing to serve out of love. And so ascending the Malaya hill, Hanuman goes in advance to Sugriva and announces the visit of Rama and Lakshmana. And he's able to say, Rama is a prince, full of wisdom and virtue. He's the eldest son of the famous Emperor Dasaratha. And to fulfill his father's promise, he's left Ayodhya with his brother and wife, and he's come to the forest. And King Dasaratha was compelled by his younger wife in fulfillment of an undefined promise given long ago to banish Rama. He's been told the story and he retells it. And in the forest, taking advantage of the prince's absence, Ravana has carried away the wife of Rama. And Rama has come here seeking your help to find her. The princes are worthy of your friendship, and you too will gain greatly from friendship with such heroes. He not only explains the situation and the background, but he also sells the idea or advises his king it's good to make friends and to develop a friendship with such heroic and noble people. Now Sugriva assumes the form of a handsome man and had a long and heart-to-heart talk with the princes. And stretching forth his hand to Rama, he says, okay, princes, if you care for the friendship of a Vanara, then here's my hand. Please accept it. And Hanuman has told me all about you, virtue and your greatness. And Rama, in his turn, grasps the hand that's being offered to him and goes further, embraces him. Now soon Hanuman gets together some firewood and makes a fire. And then they circumambulate the flames around the flames. And this is a way of securing a diplomatic friendship. Rama and Sugriva swear mutual friendship. They say, let us share our joys and sorrows. And they promise each other, let our friendship be eternal. And lighting a fire is a symbol of sacredness. Don't forget, the only ritualistic expression in those days was lighting a sacred fire. Fire being a mysterious element, a great fundamental discovery of man, having the potency, if you offer things into it, to carry your prayers onward and forward and upwards. There's a great potency, in the Havan or the Homa fire. It is also called yajna, that is a sacrificial offering, or it's the means toward it. And I know that when I was in Zimbabwe, we had a tradition throughout the whole of South Africa, actually, that every household should maybe once a week light a fire, preferably in a fireplace or in a safe place, of course, without setting all the fire alarms off, because this has such a wonderfully sacred impact on the whole environment. Now, anyway, then they cut down the branch of a tree and they sit on it. And Rama and Sugriva are engaged in a cheerful talk. And this has the effect, of course, of lifting both their spirits. And so too were Hanuman and Lakshmana seated on another branch, and Sugriva narrates the story of his life. In other words, he explains how greatly he and his elder brother, the mighty Vali, were once devoted to one another because they were brothers, and how malignant fate had, through no fault of Sugriva, made deadly enemies of them. And it come about in this way, and now Sugriva tells. See, once a demon, a Rakshasa named Mayavi, came at midnight to the gate of Kishkinda. Kishkinda is the capital of the Vanara people. And their capital was there, and vauntingly, this demon challenges Vali to instant combat in pursuit of an ancient feud. And Vali, who never refused a fight, he rushes forth impetuously. It shows his nature. And this is followed by Sugriva, and seeing them, the Rakshasa ran away. And pursuing him, they saw him disappear into a great cave. And the mouth of this cave was overgrown with brushwood. And Vali bade Sugriva, exacting an oath from him to wait at the entrance for him, and then plunges into the darkness of the cave and plunges after the enemy. Anyway, Sugriva he waits for a long time, but he waits and he waits and he waits, and Vali doesn't come out. And soon he stood there racked with doubt, and indistinct shouts and groans which seemed to his horror-struck ears. His brothers, in forms that his brother interprets as difficulties within the cave. And presently, after a short while, foaming blood issues from the cave. And this makes, this kind of is interpreted as this is sure thing that Vali has perished in the struggle. This must be Vali's blood, and this must also be the demon's blood, and both are done for. And to make sure that the victorious Rakshasa wouldn't rush out if he was still alive, in the elation of triumph and destroy whole of Kishkinda, Sugriva blocks the entrance of the cave with a huge rock and then goes back to Kishkinda. And he goes back, unfortunately, with the unfortunate tale of Vali's death. And as a rulership state invites disaster, he was persuaded by all the ministers and elders naturally to occupy the vacant throne. And while, of course, he was enjoying the sweet bliss of power like a bolt from the blue, Vali bursts in on them. He's haggard with wrath and wounds, and immediately accuses Sugriva of treason and unnatural conduct toward him, who was once his brother and his king, drove him out with the scorn and with viewing him as a wretch too vile to live with, but whom he forbore to slay only because he was unfortunately also his brother. And so by a cruel fate, he had been deprived of his home, his throne. He was always the king. Don't forget, when Vali was assumed to be dead, then the ministers and so on persuade him, well, come on, continue as usual. But this cruel fate deprives Sugriva of his home, deprives him of his throne and all, including even his wife. And he has to seek asylum in the forest with a few faithful friends, and that's the condition he finds himself now. And here at least he was safe, because Vali had been forbidden by a certain rishi, a sage, from entering the precincts on pain of instant death. We might wonder in all these stories how rishis have great power, because they're dedicated to truth, and they understand that one thought carries its weight, because every thought issues from a particular original thinker, which is cosmic mind. And so all thoughts confidently issued will all come to fruition and get interpreted as curses or promises. Now, this whole incident between Vali and Sugriva is a really good example of the moral teaching conveyed in the Puranas. Because there was nothing terribly wrong in the conduct either of Vali or of Sugriva, but anger confuses the mind, as we know. And a person who yields to anger loses the capacity to see the truth. It distorts the thing. It creates a whole veil of superimposed attitudes. And that way lies destruction. And while his anger led to his end, and Sugriva humbly confessed the truth, but Vali wouldn't listen. See, Vali's impulse to go into the cave out of anger or impulse. And then again, when he feels that Sugriva has done some wrong to him, again, without listening to any explanation, he flies into a rage. And Sugriva too, of course, he is also guilty of imprudent haste. he didn't have to block the entrance. He concluded too quickly that his brother had died. And he was afraid that the Ashura, who was victorious, would come out and kill him also. Fear and impulse. So he closes the entrance of the cave and returns to home. And at first he wasn't keen on becoming king, and yet he allows himself to be persuaded by the people. And he yielded to a subconscious desire without sufficient thought. And so difficulties came upon him. And thoughtless action leads to unhappiness. We know that as a principle. This is what we learn from the story of Sugriva. You see, at each point, this story has a lesson for all of us, not to be impulsive. Now we'll continue this story next week. And so we leave off at that point, and then we'll go into how the whole story unfolds for Sugriva, for the Vanas, for Rama, for Lakshmana, and for the whole intention and purpose of an avatara coming. I hope we learned some lessons here, not to be impulsive, not to give rise to anger and rage, to weigh things up, and also to introduce counter thoughts whenever negative thoughts of depression and despair come in for us. We leave this off with a prayer for peace. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Peace, peace. Thank you.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swami.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Thank you.
Oh.